Over the last 25 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing and highlighting some truly interesting people. Everyone who is anyone, both the famous and the infamous, from presidents and their first ladies to kings and queens, movie stars and pop stars, captains of industry, heads of state, sports personalities, innovative entrepreneurs, and some pretty fascinating everyday people. Today, I'm proud to introduce you to Dr. Michael Kounavis, a research scientist whose passion for inventing things as a young boy and ability to solve problems led him to a career that he looks forward to expanding and growing. Dr. Kounavis, it's such a pleasure to talk to you today.
It's a real pleasure and an honor. Thank you, Star.
Excellent, excellent. So, sir, let's just talk a little bit about your background. How did you first become involved in data science?
Okay, that's a very good and interesting question. So let's assume that we have a time machine and go back in time in the mid-80s. And I remember I was playing with the other children in my neighborhood, and everybody was discussing about this new marvel of technology called the home PC. At that time, we were using home computers based on a primitive processor called the Z80 or something like that. And everybody was talking about bits and bytes. And I kind of liked technology, I marveled technology, but I wouldn't imagine myself being an inventor that early at that time. Later on, in high school, I was thinking what to become next, in which school to enroll, in which college to enroll to. And I wanted to become an archaeologist or an architect or something like that. And my high school sweetheart, who later became my wife, told me, nah, don't do that. Try computer science. And I fell in love with the subject. I remember in one of the first lectures, we learned about who Turing was and his Turing machine concept about thinking machines. He's the hero, by the way, of the famous movie called The Imitation Game, which is a true story. And I love computer science. And later on, I had the opportunity to study at Columbia University, get my PhD, and later on be an active researcher in the field. So talking about data science, which is part of machine learning, I got involved when I worked with Professor Wenki Lee and Professor Paula Chow at Georgia Tech and Professor Lee Song and Tai Soo Kim, brilliant people. And we worked on a program on protecting neural networks against attacks that have the form of subliminal signals. So as life moved on, I got myself involved in more and more complex problems.
I see. You know, I'm a bit of a nerd, and I see that you've done a great deal of work with Advanced Encryption Standard, which is known as AES in your industry. But I do need your help in this one. So in layman terms, tell us a bit more about this technology.
So the idea here is that the procedure is known to everybody. It's published. In fact, AES is a standard. Everybody, including the good guys and the bad guys, know how encryption is done. But the encryption involves a long sequence of secret numbers called the key. And only the people who communicate with each other know what the sequence is. So a third party, the bad guy who does not know the key, cannot really intercept the communication.
And is that even if someone who used to be a good guy goes over to the other side?
This is true.
You can change the key, correct?
Correct. You can change the key, but you don't need to change the standard. You don't need to change AES.
See, now that makes complete sense. I love that, especially now looking at industry trends. It's clear that cybersecurity is growing quickly in popularity. What do you think, sir, that this growth can tell us about the tech field in general?
Also a good question. I'll try to provide my own opinions about the subject. By the way, I would like to make clear that I don't speak on behalf of any company in this interview, so I'll express my own insights and intuitions. One of the things that the recent advances in the field tell us is that some of the traditional problems associated with malware malware stealing sensitive data, malware corrupting data will probably go away in the future.
Okay.
Why is that? Because we can do cryptography very, very, very fast. So imagine 1 second and break it into trillions of pieces.
Mm-hmm.
These are called picoseconds. Recent research has shown that we can do cryptography in the time frames of picoseconds, which means that we can put it inside the processor. This means that the malware will not be able to figure out what data it reads.
Okay.
It won't be able essentially to corrupt data because it will be caught. So that's one trend that I see, that at some point, traditional problems will go away. However, new problems will arise. So the cat and mouse game between the bad guys and the good guys will take another form. And this is what we worked on at Georgia Tech. So because of the more and more use of machine learning, the bad guys will essentially figure out how to fool machine learning pipelines, and that will be the next generation of malware. They will basically adding noise to our videos, making me be perceived as somebody else, and vice versa.
And making one of us look like a cat in the middle of our conversation.
Precisely.
Those are the kinds of things that we have to look out for in the future. One of the things that I loved in reading about your biography was that you love to tackle the problems of building thinking machines, or that so-called AI, artificial intelligence. So explain some of these problems and how would you solve them, sir? I get to pick your brain today.
Thank you. Okay. So let's see, how should we answer to this question? Yeah, probably need to explain in layman's terms how AI and neural networks work. So if you look at a standard computer like my laptop or a calculator, it's very good in performing standard computations like additions, subtractions, combine them together in recipes that we call algorithms and so forth. But neural networks do something different. They can remember and they can learn relationships between entities. For example, if you see something that looks like 4 wheels and shiny metallic structure, that might be a car. So really a neural network can capture relationships between pieces of digital information or pixels of images, and figure out that these relationships really indicate to the fact that what is in the image may be a car. Mm-hmm. And we have done a very good job in building some systems, especially with the advances in what we call now deep learning, the last 5-10 years. So the architecture that we use today may be only one way to do things in machine learning, and maybe infinite more possibilities and combinations of things. So I believe we're in the beginning of a renaissance in AI that allow us to see more and more advances in the field.
You cannot tell me that you spend all your time thinking about how we think. So give me a little bit of background on your life outside of work. How do you spend your free time?
Thank you. Good question. I guess nowadays I'm also wearing 2 hats like you. I am a scientist and I'm a dad. And I feel very passionate about spending time with my children and my family. I try to find at least 1 hour per day to play with my kids. Just play, whether it's Legos or playing, dolls with my daughter, computer games, hide and seek. Also, I spend some time to follow what kids do at school and also help with their education sometimes when they have questions, especially around math and new subjects, which may be challenging for them. When I'm not a dad, in my very, very small percentage of spare time, I have other passions like, for example, playing the piano and writing music, which I'm not very original. No, I don't think of anything special. But it's one way to let these creative energies flow in a different direction other than science, which allows us to be healthy. And I like painting houses, so I have painted our own home in the previous town where I lived in Portland, Oregon.
So makes you such a Renaissance man, sir. I love this. And as you talked a little bit about your family, what role has your family played in your success?
I would say a major role. I would start with my parents. Um, my dad, he was an electrical engineer, but he was passionate about mathematics. So I remember him as his hobby, just solving crossword puzzles and working on simple equations. That was his hobby at home. And my mom was more of an artistic person, and she was an amateur painter, and she's an amateur painter. She's done some works, so I was inspired by them. And then, of course, I'd like to mention my wife, who prompted me to become a computer scientist in the beginning of things, and my children, of course. That's the reason why I strive to become a better person.
That is such a beautiful sentiment, Doctor. I love that. As we shared with each other, being a parent and balancing it all, or I should say, integrating your life with your work is so very, very important. And I guess as finally we come to a conclusion, I'd love to know, what is the one thing you'd like the viewer of this video feature to walk away with today, sir?
So if the viewer is interested in the field of data science, I would advise that patience and passion, the two P's, as well as imagination, are important. Also, that we are in the middle of a big wave of advances in science, which are going to change the world, really. So problems that traditionally troubled us in the past, especially with malware, may become obsolete, especially with advances in cryptography, and new problems may arise. And with machine learning, we should be able to do many more exciting things without necessarily making some jobs obsolete. Jobs will transform. So computer programmers will become data scientists and so forth. So we're in the wave of exciting things to come. And if somebody wants to get involved in the field, one has to be passionate and also probably try to balance the education between the pure science part, the math, as well as in the practice. One needs to be both a practitioner to some degree, as well as a researcher.
I was reading, just again, I told you I was a bit of a nerd, some of the very famous quotes from people in your field. And I read something that really made me think that data is the new science, but big data holds the answers. And as you have explained to us, big data is a way for us to process so much information, but also utilizing new technologies, because it's going to be evolving again and again and again. And so it's a continual learning experience when you're dealing with data science. And you have given us a bit of a primer today. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a wonderful conversation. It was a pleasure to chat with you today.
Pleasure was all mine, indeed.